The sound of furniture scraping across hardwood floors stopped me dead in my tracks. My house key hung suspended between my fingers as unfamiliar voices drifted through the front door. Someone was inside my home, my sanctuary, my inheritance, my last connection to my parents. I'm Angela, and until this moment, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. The door creaked open to reveal stacks of cardboard boxes cluttering my normally pristine entryway. The scent of someone else's cooking, heavy with garlic and oregano, had already invaded the space where my mother's signature lavender potpourri used to reign. "Oh, Angela, you're home early," my husband Mark's cheerful voice carried from the kitchen, as if this was just another Tuesday evening. "Come help us get Mom and Dad settled in." My stomach dropped. Mom and Dad, his parents, Linda and Frank. Settled in. The words came out barely above a whisper. Linda emerged from my kitchen, my mother's kitchen, wearing an apron I'd never seen before, already looking far too comfortable. "Mark didn't tell you. Our lease wasn't renewed, and we needed somewhere to stay while we figure things out." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did. "No," I managed. "He didn't mention anything." Frank appeared behind her, carrying what looked like their wedding photo. "Just temporary, of course," he said, though he was already eyeing the perfect spot above my fireplace, the same spot where my parents' wedding photo had hung for 30 years. I turned to Mark, who was suddenly very interested in unpacking a box labeled kitchen. "Can we talk?" "Privately." He followed me to the back porch, where I used to spend summers watching Mom tend her roses. The bushes were wild now, untamed since her passing 2 years ago. "They lost their apartment," Mark said, before I could speak. "The building's being converted to condos. They had nowhere else to go." "And you didn't think to discuss this with me first?" "They're my parents, Angela. What was I supposed to do? Consult your wife? Give me some warning? Anything besides ambushing me with new house guests?" "It's not an ambush. They need help." Linda's voice carried through the window. "Mark, honey, where should I put my good china? These cabinets are so cluttered." My hands clenched into fists. "That's my mother's china. We can make room," Mark said quickly. "It's just temporary, remember." But I saw it in his eyes. The same look he got whenever his parents needed something. That mixture of guilt and obligation that always ended with him choosing them over me. "How temporary?" I asked. "Just until they get back on their feet. A few months, maybe?" "A few months." The words echoed in my head as I watched Linda rearranging my kitchen through the window. Frank was already settled in my father's old armchair, remote in hand like he owned the place. "I teach online classes from home," I reminded him. "I need quiet, space, routine." "They'll respect that," Mark interrupted. But we both knew it was a lie. I felt it then, that first crack in the foundation of everything I'd built. This house was my anchor, my inheritance, the last piece of my parents I had left. And now it was being invaded, piece by piece, memory by memory. "I need some air," I said, already heading for the gate. "Angela, wait." But I was already walking, my phone in hand, texting my sister Sophie. "They're here. Mark let them move in," without asking. Her response was immediate. What the actual hell? What indeed? As I walked, Linda's calculating smile played on repeat in my mind. This wasn't just about needing a place to stay. I knew that look. She had plans. And somehow, I'd become an obstacle in my own home. The sun was setting behind the houses, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed. In my pocket, my phone buzzed again with Sophie's message. "Want me to come over?" I typed back, "Not yet. I need to think." And think I did. About every subtle dig, every backhanded compliment, every time Linda and Frank had tried to undermine my place in Mark's life. Now they were in my house, touching my things, erasing my parents' memory piece by piece. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a declaration of war. 3 days into the invasion, and my office door swung open without a knock. Linda stood there, vacuum cleaner humming in her hands, while I sat frozen mid-sentence during my online design workshop. "Sorry, dear," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "Just tidying up a bit, don't mind me." 20 students watched through their webcams as I muted my microphone. "I'm teaching right now." "Oh, this won't take but a minute." The vacuum roared to life, drowning out any possibility of continuing my class. I typed a quick message to my students. "Technical difficulties, taking a 5-minute break." Then I ended the recording and stood up. "Linda, I explained yesterday that I teach from 9 to 11. These are paid sessions." She switched off the vacuum, her lips pursed. "Well, how was I supposed to remember that? Besides, this house needs a proper cleaning schedule. When was the last time anyone vacuumed under your desk?" My mother's voice echoed in my head. "Pick your battles wisely, Angela." But Mom never had to deal with Linda. "I'll clean my office myself, after class." "Nonsense. You're so busy with your little computer job. Let me help." She reached for my desk, shifting papers I'd carefully arranged for today's presentation. My phone buzzed. A message from Tom. "Lunch today? Got that marketing proposal you asked about?" "Actually," I said to Linda, "I have a business lunch. I'll be leaving right after class." Her eyebrows shot up. "Business lunch?" "But I'm making my special meatloaf, Mark's favorite." She emphasized his name like a weapon. "Another time." I sat back down, making it clear the conversation was over. She lingered in the doorway, vacuum silent but still present, like a threat. "I suppose some people prioritize work over family," she said finally, shuffling away. I waited until her footsteps faded before reopening my class session. My hands shook as I tried to continue teaching, but the damage was done. The rest of the class felt forced, my usual enthusiasm replaced by a tight knot in my stomach. Later, at the small cafe downtown, Tom listened as I recounted the morning's events. "She's marking her territory," he said, sliding a folder across the table, "like a dog peeing on a fire hydrant." Thanks for that mental image. I flipped through the proposal he'd drafted for my freelance business. "You really think I could make it work, going completely independent? Your current teaching platform takes 40% of your earnings. Go solo, build your own brand, and—" He stopped mid-sentence, staring past me. "Incoming." I turned to see Mark and Frank entering the cafe. My husband's face darkened when he spotted me. "Angela, Mom said you were in a business meeting." "I am." I gestured to Tom and the paperwork between us. "Tom's helping me explore some options for expanding my teaching business." Frank's quiet voice carried unexpected weight. "Sounds expensive. In this economy, stability is key." "Actually," Tom interjected, "Angela's current success rate suggests—" "I'm sure you mean well," Frank cut in, "but family should handle family matters." The way he said family made it clear I barely qualified. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "We should let them get back to their meeting, Dad. We're just grabbing lunch." "Of course." Frank's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though I'm sure your mother would have loved to see you for lunch, Angela. She went to all that trouble with the meatloaf." They moved to a table across the restaurant, but the damage was done. I could feel Mark's periodic glances, like pinpricks on my skin. "Well," Tom said quietly. That was subtle as a sledgehammer. I stared at the proposal in front of me. "They've been there 3 days, Tom. 3 days, and I'm already losing my mind." "Then maybe it's time to start playing their game." He tapped the folder. "Financial independence is a powerful thing." My phone lit up with a text from Sophie. "Coming over tonight. No excuses. We need to talk." I looked back at Mark, now deep in conversation with his father. 3 days ago, I had a home, a husband who I thought supported me, and a clear vision of my future. Now everything felt like quicksand, pulling me under while Linda and Frank watched from solid ground. "Okay," I told Tom, turning back to the proposal. "Show me how to make this work." Because one thing was becoming crystal clear. In this war, I needed my own ammunition. The bills were spread across my desk like evidence at a crime scene. 2 weeks of Linda and Frank's residence had doubled our utilities, yet somehow I was the only one concerned about the mounting expenses. I heard their voices drift up from the kitchen, thinking they were alone in the house. I'd told them I had a morning workshop, but canceled it after losing 3 students last week due to Linda's cleaning interruptions. The property values in this neighborhood have skyrocketed, Frank said. If we sold now, I froze, pen hovering over my budget calculations. Mark would never agree, Linda replied. He's too attached to what Angela wants. Mark will see reason. The boys always understood the importance of family security. Their voices dropped lower, and I crept to the stairs, my heart thundering in my chest. Retirement fund won't last forever, Frank was saying. This house is our best option. We just need to help them see it's for the best. Linda's tone carried that false sweetness I'd grown to hate. Angela's business isn't stable enough to maintain a property like this anyway. My phone buzzed, Sophie asking if we were still on for dinner. I typed back, "Come now, please." I waited until I heard them move to the back patio before descending the stairs. The kitchen counter held papers they'd left behind. Bank statements, property assessments, real estate listings. My hands shook as I snapped photos with my phone. The front door opened, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Mark walked in, home early from work. "Hey," he said, frowning at my expression. "Everything okay?" Before I could answer, Linda bustled in from the patio. "Mark, perfect timing. Your father and I were just discussing some family matters." "Financial matters," I corrected, holding up their papers. "Care to explain why you're researching property values for my house?" The silence that followed felt like a noose tightening. "Now, Angela," Frank began, entering behind Linda. "This affects all of us." "All of us?" My voice cracked. "This is my inheritance, my parents' home, which requires significant maintenance," Linda cut in. "The roof needs work, the plumbing's outdated." "Stop," I turned to Mark. "Did you know about this?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. They mentioned looking into options. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Sophie's arrival saved me from completely falling apart. "What's going on?" she asked, reading the room's tension. "Show her," I told Mark, shoving the papers at him. "Show her how your parents want to sell my home, out from under me." "That's not," Linda started, but Sophie cut her off. "Are you kidding me?" My sister's nursing scrubs still carried hospital antiseptic, but her rage was pure fire. 2 weeks. You've been here 2 weeks, and you're already plotting? "We're thinking of everyone's future," Frank insisted. "Everyone's future?" I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. "You mean your future, your retirement, your security." "Angela," Mark reached for me, but I stepped back. "Don't, just don't." I gathered the papers, hands steadier than I expected. "I need some air." Sophie followed me onto the front porch, where I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. "I have proof now," I whispered, showing her the photos on my phone. "They're not just trying to take over my home. They want to take it away completely." "We should call Tom," Sophie said. "He'll know what legal options." The door opened behind us. Mark stepped out, looking lost. "Can we talk about this? Like you talked to me about your parents moving in?" I asked. "Or about them planning to sell my house?" "They're just exploring options," he repeated weakly. "Options." The word tasted bitter. "Here's an option. They can leave." "Angela, no." Something inside me hardened, like concrete setting. "I'm done being the understanding wife. This is my home, Mark, mine, and I will not let them take it from me." Sophie's hand found mine, squeezing tight. Inside, I could hear Linda's voice rising, probably spinning this into another example of my instability. But for the first time since they arrived, I felt steady, clear, the path ahead crystallizing with terrible certainty. "You should go back inside," I told Mark. "Your parents need you." He hesitated, then turned away. The door closed behind him, with a finality that echoed in my bones. "What are you going to do?" Sophie asked quietly. I stared at my childhood home, at the windows where my mother once hung curtains that Linda had replaced. At the garden my father had tended, now being reorganized by Frank. Whatever it takes, I answered. Whatever it takes to make them pay. My laptop screen flickered with another cancellation email. Fourth student this week. The reviews mentioned unprofessional environment and constant interruptions. 3 months of Linda and Frank's presence had systematically dismantled everything I'd built. A knock at my office door made me flinch. Not Linda this time. Mark stood there, holding papers. The mortgage payment bounced, he said quietly. I stared at him. That's impossible. Mom and Dad offered to help. He wouldn't meet my eyes. They suggested refinancing. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. The mysterious bills, the rising expenses, Linda's smug smile every time she mentioned family contributions. They're bleeding us dry on purpose, I whispered. Don't be paranoid. But his voice lacked conviction. They're trying to help. A text from Tom lit up my phone. Meeting canceled. Investor backed out after background check. My hands started shaking. Linda had mentioned knowing someone at the investment firm. Just another coincidence. I need to see the bank statements, I said. Mom's already handling it. Our bank statements, Mark, now. He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. They're not letting me access the joint account anymore. Said it was for security after some suspicious activity. The room spun slightly. What suspicious activity? Large transfers to an unknown account. He finally looked at me. They think you're hiding money. A laugh bubbled up, bitter and sharp. They think Do you hear yourself? Footsteps in the hallway announced Linda's arrival. She carried a tray of tea, playing the concerned mother-in-law to perfection. I just heard about your business troubles, dear. Her sympathy dripped like poison honey. Such a shame. But perhaps it's a sign to consider more stable options, like selling my home, like giving them everything they wanted. I need some air, I managed, grabbing my keys. In this state? Linda's voice carried down the hallway. Mark, you can't let her drive when she's so unstable. But I was already out the door, calling Sophie. She answered on the first ring. I was just about to call you. Someone's been asking questions at the hospital about your mental health history. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What? HR got a concerned call about my troubled sister, potentially affecting my job performance. She paused. The caller mentioned your recent erratic behavior and financial irregularities. I pulled into Tom's office parking lot, my vision blurring. He was waiting outside. They're destroying everything, I said as he approached. My business, my reputation. Your credit score too, he added grimly. I did some digging. Someone's been making inquiries, raising red flags, the kind that make investors nervous. They want me desperate. The realization felt like ice in my veins. Desperate enough to sell. Tom's expression hardened. There's more. I found something in the property records. Your parents' mortgage had a clause about maintaining family ownership. If you sell, the proceeds go to a trust, I finished. For future generations. Mom made sure of it, which they'd know if they'd seen the full documents. He met my eyes. Angela, they're not just trying to force you out. They're trying to make you look incompetent enough for Mark to take control of the estate. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Come home. We need to talk about power of attorney. Something inside me shifted, like a key turning in a lock. I thought of Linda's careful manipulations, Frank's quiet pressure, Mark's willing blindness, 3 months of subtle degradation, of carefully orchestrated destruction. I need a lawyer, I said. Tom nodded. Already called one. But Angela, they're not going to stop. This kind of calculated attack. I know. I looked at my childhood home in the distance, where Linda and Frank were probably already planning their next move. That's why I'm going to beat them at their own game. How? I thought of every dismissive comment, every orchestrated failure, every piece of my life they'd systematically undermined. By letting them think they've won, I said, right before I take everything from them. My phone buzzed again. Sophie sending screenshots of the hospital inquiry. The caller's name made my blood run cold. Linda's sister, a psychiatric nurse with access to medical records. The game had changed. They weren't just trying to take my home anymore. They were trying to erase me completely. The neighborhood block party buzzed with conversation and laughter, but I could feel Linda's performance before I saw it. A cluster of my longtime neighbors gathered around her, their expressions shifting from concern to pity as they glanced my way. Of course we're worried, Linda's voice carried across the lawn. The erratic behavior, the financial troubles. Sometimes love means making hard decisions for family. My fingers tightened around my glass. Sophie appeared at my elbow, her face tight with anger. "She's telling everyone you're having a mental breakdown," she whispered. "That Mark might need to take over the estate for your own good." The glass nearly slipped from my hand as Frank approached our small group, playing his part perfectly. "Angela, perhaps you should sit down. You're looking rather unstable." "I'm fine." The words came out sharp enough to draw attention. "See what I mean?" Linda's stage whisper to our neighbor Jane carried clearly. "We're just trying to protect her from herself." Mark stood between his parents and me, saying nothing. Always saying nothing. "Actually," I said, my voice stronger than I felt, "I'd love to hear more about these concerns, Linda. Please, share them with everyone." The party chatter died down. Linda's smile flickered, but held. "This isn't the place, dear. We're just trying to help. Like you helped access our bank accounts?" The words fell like stones into the sudden quiet. "Or how you helped contact my students' parents about my unstable behavior." "Angela," Mark stepped forward, reaching for my arm. "Don't do this here." I jerked away from him. "Why not here? Isn't this exactly where Linda wants to have this conversation? In front of everyone." "You're proving their point," he hissed. "Just calm down." "Calm down," I laughed, and the sound scared even me. "While they destroy everything I've built, while they try to steal my home, nobody's stealing anything." Frank's authoritative voice boomed. "We're protecting family assets." "My family's assets," I corrected. "My parents' home, my inheritance." Linda touched her chest, the perfect picture of maternal concern. "You see? These paranoid accusations. Mark, honey, perhaps it's time to discuss that power of attorney." The glass shattered in my hand. I barely felt the sting of broken crystal or the warm trickle of blood. "Angela." Sophie moved toward me, but Linda was faster. "Oh dear God," she gasped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's hurting herself. Mark, do something." "I'm calling an ambulance," Frank announced, phone already in hand. "Don't you dare." My voice sounded strange in my ears, distant and cold. "Don't you fucking dare. This is exactly what we were afraid of," Linda said to the horrified onlookers. "The mood swings, the aggression. We've tried to handle this privately, but handle this." I stepped toward her, watching her theatrical flinch with detached fascination. "Like you handled my business contacts, my bank accounts, my reputation." "Angela, please," Mark begged. "You're embarrassing yourself." Something snapped inside me. "I'm embarrassing myself while your mother orchestrates my public breakdown, while your father tries to seize control of my home. They're trying to help." "Help?" I turned to the gathered crowd. "Ask them about the trust clause in my parents' will. Ask them why they're so desperate to force a sale they can't profit from. Ask them." "That's enough." Frank's command cracked like a whip. "Mark, get her inside before she hurts herself again." Mark reached for me, but Sophie stepped between us. "Touch her, and I call the police." The tension crackled like lightning before a storm. I looked at Mark, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing my husband's face. "Choose," I said quietly. "Right here, right now. Choose." He looked at his parents, then back at me. "You need help, Angela. Professional help." The last thread of hope snapped clean. "Okay then." I pulled my wedding ring off, letting it fall into the grass. "I choose too." I walked away from the party, from the whispers and stares, from the ruins of my marriage. Behind me, I heard Linda's performance reach its crescendo. the concerned mother-in-law, watching her unstable daughter-in-law's public meltdown. But as I reached my car, I smiled, because Linda had finally overplayed her hand, and now I knew exactly how to destroy her. The restraining order arrived 3 days after the block party. I stared at the legal document, my hands trembling, as I read the allegations. Erratic behavior, threats of violence, emotional instability, all carefully documented by Linda, supported by witness statements from concerned neighbors. I wasn't allowed within 100 feet of my own home. "They can't do this," Sophie said, pacing my temporary room in Tom's guest house. "It's your house." "They already did." I watched through the window as rain pelted the glass. Linda's sister provided medical opinions about my deteriorating mental state. Frank's golf buddy judge signed the order. My phone buzzed. Another email from my remaining students' parents, withdrawing from my program. Linda's whisper campaign had worked perfectly. "The lawyer says we can fight it," Tom said from the doorway. "But it'll take time, money I no longer had access to. Thanks to the emergency financial controls Mark had been granted. For my own protection, of course." "Angela?" Sophie's voice sounded distant. "What are you thinking?" I touched the window, tracing raindrops with my finger. "I'm thinking about Mom. How hard she fought to keep the house and the family. How I promised her." The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. Tom checked his security camera and swore softly. "It's Mark." My chest tightened. "I can't." "You don't have to." Sophie moved toward the door, but I caught her arm. "No, let him in. I need to hear what he has to say." Mark looked smaller somehow, standing in Tom's living room. The confident husband I'd known, replaced by this uncertain stranger. "They're worried about you," he started. "Worried enough to steal my home, my business, my life." He flinched. "Nobody's stealing anything. But after your behavior at the party." "My behavior?" The laugh that escaped me didn't sound entirely sane. Maybe Linda was right about me after all. "Tell me, Mark, how should I have behaved while your mother systematically destroyed everything I care about?" "She's trying to help." "Help?" I stepped closer, watching him back away. "By having her sister fabricate mental health concerns, by turning my neighbors against me, by freezing my accounts. You're not thinking clearly." I've never thought more clearly in my life. I pulled out my phone, showing him the photos I'd gathered, your parents' financial records, the calls they made to my students' parents, the conversations with real estate agents, every step of their plan to force me out. His face paled. "Where did you get those?" "Does it matter? What matters is what I'm going to do with them." "Angela, please." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "They're my parents. They're not perfect, but they're family," I finished. "And I'm not really, never was. That's not fair." "Fair?" My voice cracked. "Was it fair when your mother convinced everyone I was having a mental breakdown? When your father used his connections to freeze my accounts? When you stood there and let them destroy me?" Silence stretched between us like a chasm. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I want my home back. I want my life back. I want—" My voice caught. "I want the husband who promised to stand by me, not the coward who helped his parents tear me apart." "They're filing for divorce," he said quietly. "Dad's already drawn up the papers. Given your current state." "My current state," I nodded slowly. "The one they carefully orchestrated. Tell me, Mark, did you know about their plan from the beginning? Or did they convince you along the way that destroying me was for my own good?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. "Get out, Angela. Get out before I give them real proof of my instability." After he left, I sat in the growing darkness, listening to the rain. Sophie and Tom kept their distance, understanding I needed this moment. My phone lit up with a text from Linda. "We're only trying to help you heal. When you're ready to accept that help." I deleted it without finishing. Then I opened my laptop and began typing. If they wanted to paint me as unstable, fine. If they wanted to take everything from me, let them try. But they'd forgotten something crucial about cornered animals. They fight back. "Tom," I called out. Remember that dirt you found on Frank's business dealings? Time to use it. The rain kept falling, but I barely noticed anymore. I was too busy planning their destruction. The anonymous email to Frank's business partners took 3 weeks to achieve its intended effect. I watched from across the street as police cars surrounded my home, their lights painting the evening in red and blue. Linda stood on the porch, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. Frank sat in the back of a police car, his face ashen. Mark paced between them, running his hands through his hair. "You sure about this?" Sophie asked beside me. I touched the manila envelope in my hands. They wanted to paint me as unstable. Fine, let's see how they handle their own carefully constructed world falling apart. The detective I'd contacted earlier spotted me and nodded. Time to move. Walking up my own driveway felt like crossing a battlefield. Linda saw me first, her eyes widening with recognition, then narrowing with fury. "You," she hissed. "You did this." "Did what, Linda? Expose Frank's creative accounting, or his deals with those shell companies?" Mark stepped between us. "Angela, don't what? Tell the truth?" I held up the envelope. "Like the truth about how you and your parents orchestrated my breakdown, documented everything so carefully." Linda's face paled. "Those records are private." "Like my medical records? The ones your sister accessed illegally?" I turned to the detective. "I believe that's relevant to your investigation, Detective Chen." "You're destroying this family," Mark said. "No." My voice stayed steady, though my hand shook. "Your parents destroyed it. You helped them. We were trying to protect you. Stop lying." The words exploded from me. "You wanted my house, my inheritance. You couldn't stand that I had something you couldn't control." Linda's composure cracked. "We deserved security. After everything we've done for this family. This was never your family's home." I cut in. "It was mine, my parents' legacy." "Your parents?" Linda laughed, high and brittle. "Your father was a fool who—" The slap echoed across the lawn. Linda's hand flew to her cheek, shock replacing anger. "Angela." Mark moved toward me, but Sophie stepped between us. "Touch her," she warned, "and I'll add assault to the charges." Detective Chen approached, his notepad ready. "Mrs. Harrison, about those medical records." Linda's facade crumbled completely. "You don't understand," she pleaded. "We were going to lose everything. Our savings, our status. Frank promised he could fix it if we just had some capital. The house was never yours to take." I opened the envelope, spreading documents across the hood of the police car. "Every step of your plan, every call, every manipulation, every lie, documented as carefully as you documented my instability." Frank's voice carried from the police car. "Linda, don't say another word." But she was beyond hearing him. "We gave you everything. A husband, a family, support. You gave me nothing," I corrected quietly. You always took. And now," I gestured to the police cars, the gathering neighbors, her crumbling world. "Now you lose everything. Please." Mark tried one last time. "We can fix this." I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and felt nothing but pity. "No, Mark, we can't. But you know what? I don't want to anymore." Detective Chen finished his notes. "We'll need statements from everyone." I handed him the envelope. "Everything you need is here. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence showing how they orchestrated my mental breakdown to seize control of my inheritance." Linda lunged for the envelope, but an officer caught her arm. As they led her toward another police car, she turned back to me, her face twisted with something between hatred and fear. "You'll regret this," she spat. "You'll end up alone, just like you?" I finished. "No, Linda, I won't. Because unlike you, I know the difference between having things and having people who truly care." I watched them drive away, Frank in one car, Linda in another, Mark standing lost in the driveway of a home that was never his. Sophie squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I looked up at my house, my parents' house, standing quiet and strong against the evening sky. "No," I admitted, "but I will be." The police lights faded into the distance, taking with them the family that had tried to destroy me. I climbed my porch steps alone, finally ready to reclaim my home. And this time, no one would take it from me. The divorce papers lay signed on my lawyer's desk, but it was the other document that held my attention. Frank's handwritten confession, detailing every manipulation, every scheme, every calculated move to destroy me. The DA's offering a deal, my lawyer said. In exchange for Frank's testimony about the financial fraud, they'll recommend minimal sentences. Through the office window, I watched Linda pace the hallway, her designer clothes replaced by something simpler, her makeup unable to hide her exhaustion. Angela, Sophie touched my arm. You don't have to decide right now. But I did. Because Linda had asked to speak with me one last time, and I needed to know what victory really meant. I found her by the window, staring at nothing. She spoke without turning. I used to watch my mother lose everything, she said quietly. Her home, her dignity, her children's respect. I swore I'd never be her. So you became something worse, she flinched. We thought we were protecting our future, Mark's future, by destroying mine, by controlling what we could. Finally, she turned. Do you know what it's like, feeling irrelevant, watching your whole world slip away? I thought of those first weeks after they moved in, how they'd systematically dismantled my life piece by piece. Yes, I answered, I do. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. Mark's staying with his cousin, she said finally. He wanted to apologize, but he's still choosing his family. Aren't you? Her gesture encompassed the legal papers, the confession, the wreckage of her life. Choosing your family's legacy over mercy. The word hit like a slap. Mercy. After what you did. We were wrong, she whispered. And for the first time, I heard real regret. So wrong. But destroying us won't bring back what you lost. No. I pulled out my phone, showing her the email I'd drafted to the DA. But this might bring something else. She read it slowly, her hands shaking. You'd advocate for leniency. Why? Because my mother taught me the difference between justice and vengeance. I took back the phone. And because I refuse to let your actions define who I become. The door opened. Frank stood there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. The house, he said roughly. We never told you why we really wanted it. Frank, don't, Linda started, but he continued. It reminded me of my childhood home, the one I lost when my father's business failed. I thought having it would fix everything broken inside me. He met my eyes. I was wrong. I thought of my own broken pieces, of how close I'd come to letting revenge reshape me into something unrecognizable. The DA's office will have my recommendation within the hour, I said. What happens after that is up to you. Linda stepped toward me, hand outstretched, but dropped it when I didn't move. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. I gathered my papers. Just remember this moment the next time you try to take something that isn't yours. Outside, Sophie waited with Tom. You okay? I looked back at the building where my almost in-laws faced the consequences of their choices, where my almost husband would soon learn of my decision. I kept waiting to feel satisfied, I admitted, to enjoy their downfall. But all I feel is free, Tom finished. And he was right. The weight of revenge had lifted, replaced by something lighter. Not forgiveness, never that, but perhaps understanding. That evening I sat in my mother's garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors she would have loved. The house stood quiet behind me, no longer haunted by Linda's presence or Frank's schemes. My phone buzzed with a message from Mark. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. Sophie brought out tea in Mom's old cups, the ones Linda had tried to replace. So what now? She asked. I touched the familiar brick of my home, feeling its strength, its history, its future. Now, I said, I rebuild. But this time, I choose who gets to be part of the foundation. The garden needed work. The roses had withered under Linda's care. But as I watched the last light fade, I knew they'd bloom again. Different, perhaps. changed by the shadow of what had happened here, but stronger for having survived the storm.